Hi, I'm Binnedell. I'm a professor of strategy and leadership at the Gordon Institute of Business Science, and it's great to talk to you today about a subject that's occupied me for many, many years and occupies all companies and all people who want to lead an organization. The question is about what is strategy and how can we make this incredibly powerful concept work for you and your business. The idea of strategy, in fact, comes out of the military. It has to do with warfare. And of course, warfare is different than business, but it has some interesting similarities. The Greeks developed the word, and it has two meanings that are relevant to us. The first is strategos, which is the art of the general. Any leader of a team or a business or an organization has to lead a team and themselves into a future that they wish to create. And that's the art of the general, the art of the CEO, the art of the leader. The other is the strategia, which is the content of the strategy, the creative, disruptive, ground-changing ideas that are going to shape the business, shape a market perhaps, or maybe even an industry. So those are the two components. On the one hand, how do we compete? What are we going to do next? What are we really good at? The content. And how do we make that happen? How do we get those ideas shared? And how do we get them executed? That's the core of strategy. In a time of tremendous change, where South Africa is changing in extraordinary ways at a faster and faster pace, and we're living in a world that's changing also incredibly quickly, and we've got to deal with it because in many ways we are rule takers, not rule makers as a smallish economy. We've got to balance the global South African local dynamics into an understanding of a map, if you like, an understanding of what's happening around us. How do we interpret it? Most of us drive the same route to work every day, and one would be forgiven for waking up when you get to work. But the environment we're in is so full of change, is moving in such dynamic ways that what you did in the past is not necessarily what you need to do in the future. That doesn't mean that how you've succeeded in the past is irrelevant. But in a time of rapid change, in terms of innovation and keeping up the pace and making sure you don't fall behind, you've got to have a vision of what is next. And that's at the core of strategy. What will we do next? Whether it's 90 days or the next 2 years, what will you do next? And a good strategy is a comprehensive idea, which may become a plan, which may be translated into action, of what you are going to do next in terms of dealing with the market and those who support you, in terms of dealing with the competitive dynamics that you face, and then dealing with the bigger picture of the environment around you and how it's changing. There's a very simple test of strategy that I've often used with teams or companies. It goes like this. What can this business do that the world wants it to do that its competitors can't do? If you think about that statement, it has three dimensions. What can the business do? What are you really good at? What are your capabilities, hard and soft? What does the market want you to do, and how do you know what it wants you to do? And then the final point, which is the rivalry. Great firms succeed because they do something different that other businesses can't and meet a deeply seated need. It's important to have a philosophy or a point of view about your purpose, to try and articulate in an organization what we stand for, why we stand for it, and what our core central concept is. If you can do that, it's a big plus. The next thing is to understand what it is that you want to be good at in practice. The third thing is to make sure that what you're good at and what you believe in gives you a point of differentiation. When you think about strategy and you look at an organization, there are three kind of levels of ways of looking at it. Many companies don't really have a strategy, because a strategy is a simple set of ideas that meet the criteria I've talked about. And they're very busy managing, they're probably working hard, but they don't have a clarity of purpose or a clarity of strategy and a clarity of what everyone's meant to do practically. I call them non-active. They are busy, but they don't have a strategy. Another way of looking at it is reactive strategy. The world changes, a new technology opens up, a new market opens up, the rivals make a move, and you can react to that. You can find intelligent ways to react to it. The third category is really the core of strategy and is very hard to do. And that is the ability to create something that's original, unique, and different. We call that proactive strategy. It's the ability to shape the market or shape the industry by some significant innovation. As so many of us are saying, we're living in this disruptive world, and the digital economy is changing how we do business and how we live in a dramatic way. Alvin Toffler wrote a remarkable book in 1979 called Future Shock. He said the future, and remember that's over 30 years ago, is going to come in forms and shapes that's going to shock us at a personal level, within our families, within our organizations. I think in many ways that's arrived. The question is, who will survive this rate of change? We see many companies that have totally disrupted markets. The famous story of Kodak, over 100 years old, disrupted by Instagram, a tiny player that totally changed the industry. We've seen how a company like Google has emerged from almost nowhere in less than 20 years. It sits with $20 billion in cash, and it's able to go into almost any markets. And if you take your smartphone and look at what physical products it's replaced, it's an extraordinary list, from the clock to the book, to gathering information, to travel, to maps. It's an endless list of physical products that it's managed to replace and therefore change those industries in dramatic ways. I remember when the calculator replaced the slide rule. A digital calculator replaced Faber-Castell, who had a many multi-million-dollar market selling slide rules that allowed engineers to calculate. Disruption is the order of the day, and it's going to accelerate. And you need to be sure that you as an individual leader, but also that your team and organization are prepared to disrupt your own logic. That's at the heart of strategy. A famous general said, no plan survives the first gunshot, because when two armies collide, two strategies intermingle, and a third thing happens. It's that ability to sense what that is the key of good strategic leadership. The digital economy changes the rules of the game, but so do South African dynamics. South Africans and the way they live, what they're thinking about, their hopes and fears for the future, are going through a tremendous period of change and are likely to continue. Whether you're a retailer, a bank, or a telco, if you don't understand the dynamics of this process, which is economic, it's sociological, it's psychological, it's happening in front of us as countries like us modernize and move forward at a tremendous rate. In fact, at an unprecedented rate. We need to make sure that our institutions are moving faster than that rate, and that your memory is not stronger than your vision, and that your vision is stronger than memory. That's why we place so much emphasis on what is next. Every organization, in a way, lives in two worlds. It lives in its internal world, what we do every day, the people we work with, how we relate, the meetings, the decisions, and an external world, the markets that we're trying to work with and satisfy. The problem with mature organizations is they become internally focused. Good strategy always starts outside, asking how can I add value and how can I do it differently? That's the power of strategy. Normally what happens is our internal logic drives our external logic, and that's the wrong way around. Strategy is a fantastic subject to study. It's not something you can lay out in 5 bullet points. It's a field of study. It's a discipline, and it's a way of thinking. It's a way of thinking that you can learn by watching good and bad decisions, and it's a skill you can practice by continuous effort and observation. In my view, strategy and the need for it is the most powerful concept in business, because it's about what we will do next that will add value. And if you can practice that understanding and constantly look for good examples in your own business and elsewhere, you'll start to master the art of the insight and the process of making strategy happen, and what a great strategic decision is. It's hard to tell when a company has a good strategy. The tragedy of life is we understand it backwards, but we have to live it forwards. And this is the challenge of good strategy, is you constantly looking forwards to how you can add value. So one of the questions we have in South Africa is we have very big companies, and we're privileged to have them. They're extraordinary. Strategy is not about size. Strategy is about a way of thinking. So you can apply it to your individual personal life, you can apply it to a team of 5 people, and you can apply it to an organization of 100,000 people. It's the basic logic of the question that is the core of its power, is that what will you do next and what will be different? So in the role of strategic leadership, there are 3 different kinds of roles, all of them critically important. The most obvious and easiest one is the managerial skill. It's that ability to run a good meeting, assemble a budget, communicate effectively, deal with interpersonal challenges, and pull together the right team. It's a managerial role. The leadership role is a slightly different role because that's about personal influence or about others around you that have that influence and harnessing it. But it is about changing the organization through the behavior of its people by setting an example, by being creative, by getting ahead of the organization. Most good leaders should be ahead of the organization by definition because they're thinking, along with their colleagues, about what is next. The final strategic role is about innovation. We can call it entrepreneurship, we can call it innovation. It doesn't matter what label you give it. But it's that creative impulse in an organization to experiment, to take risks, to try new things, to see what's going on in the world that are best practices, even in other industries, and absorb them into your business. Most of us have our best innovative ideas when we're not working. What an irony that is. So do we run our organizations in such a dull, uncreative way that we're most creative when we're outside them? I found that to generally be true. Our best ideas are in the car, in the shower, or while you're on holiday. That's a bit weird. You've got to make sure as a leader that you're connected to pathways of innovation, that you surround yourself from time to time with really creative people who are challenging your most basic assumptions. And it's from that great ideas come.